Hello chess friends and welcome to Zadov's chess channel and welcome to the Altibox Norway Chess tournament in 2020. We are now in the round 3 again and it's the derby of the day. It's Alireza Firouzja against Fabiano Caruana. So if you have followed this tournament so far, it has been a great tournament and Alireza lost unfortunately the match game against Magnus Carlsen. He had really a great position. He managed to get a draw with the black pieces against Magnus Carlsen in the classical time format, but also he was so close to beat the world champion because he had an equal position, at least an equal position against the world champion, but he lost in time and he got really some negative comments on his loss because he was frustrated a little bit. He ran away. He was really mad when he lost the game against Magnus Carlsen, and as I said, he got really some negative comments. But in my opinion, I really liked that the fact that Alireza Firouzja was frustrated because he cares. That's the most important thing, to care. And have seen now many grand matches. Okay, they lose a game against Magnus Carlsen. They handshake. Okay, I've lost the game against Magnus. He's of course the best, but Alireza, he was frustrated. He wants to be better and better. In one particular moment in chess history, he wants probably to beat Magnus Carlsen. So that's why it's good sometimes to be frustrated, to work on your weaknesses, to try to be better, because we can only learn from our mistakes. And that's why I really love Alireza Firouzja, and I really love his games because he is attractive one to watch. His chess is very attractive. He plays theoretical novelties. He plays a very aggressive style. He plays really tactical motifs, and that's why I think we should really support Alireza Firouzja, not because he's now the most talented young player in the world, but it's really important for chess to evolve, because if Magnus Carlsen is, for instance, now the best chess player, maybe even the best chess player in history, but I think Magnus Carlsen is not the limit of the chess world that can happen. Someone will overtake Magnus Carlsen even. So that's why Alireza Firouzja, in my eyes, is always a world championship material, and I wish him all of the best in the career. And as I said, I really don't care if he's frustrated. He has every right to be frustrated when he has a winning position against Magnus and he loses it. So he'll still improve, of course, and maybe in the near future he can even beat the world champion Magnus. So let's check out now the game between Alireza and Fabiano Caruana, and it was really a great game. Again, in the classical time format, it was a little bit boring. Fabiano Caruana got the isolated pawn, so they agreed to a draw very fast. Now in this Armageddon game, it was really fire on the board, but of course created by Alireza Firouzja, because we all know Fabiano Caruana is a more pragmatic player, a more positional player. On the other hand, Alireza Firouzja is of course the great tactician, the great attacker, and this was really the derby of the day 3. So let's check out now the game. Knight to f3 played by Alireza, d5, d4 played by Alireza, and now knight to f6 by Fabiano, and e3. Very passive setup so far, but here already Alireza has prepared really a great line. In the game, c5 was played by Fabiano Caruana, because okay, you have played this passive setup e3. I'm going to attack you with the move c5. So what should we do here? Here Alireza goes into this most aggressive line with the move d takes c5, and it's basically a reversed Queen's Gambit accepted. And I've played many times with the white pieces, the Queen's Gambit accepted. And what the main thing about the Queen's Gambit accepted is that you want to simply recapture the pawn. But there are these lines which Alireza will play now. I've seen that from Black's perspective. Now you see Alireza protects the pawn. And this game is already a complicated one. So I really liked Alireza's idea to complicate things in an early stage of the game against Fabiano Caruana, because in the Armageddon game, Fabiano had only 7 minutes on the clock. Alireza has, of course, 10 minutes on the clock. So, but Alireza, he has to win the game. He has to make something happen in the Armageddon. So, a5. This is a natural idea. We want to split the pawns and then take the pawn on c5, and afterward that also the pawn on a5, and then continue the game with the weakness on a2. a3 is not a possibility because you get some tactical threats on the a file, so you couldn't recapture then with the a pawn. So that's why you have to play here c3, and now we have a takes b4, c takes b4, and now b6, which is also again the same idea, just to split pawns to get our pawn back, because we have taken the pawn in the beginning. Now it's really time to get our pawn back in the game. Alireza tried bishop to b5, getting the check. We have bishop to d7, and now bishop takes d7, queen to d7, and now a4. Very, very aggressive move, because here Alireza has prepared really an annoying game here from Black's perspective, because we have now b takes c5, but now b5. And what we have accomplished here are two connected pass pawns in an early stage of the game, which is really incredible. As I said, I faced this position many times from White's perspective when Black has this 2 pawns on the A and B file, and I'm familiar with these lines. Now this is the reversed setup, and here already a very tense game, because first of all, what we should notice that Black has here the pawn central control, so Black can really push the pawns in the center and really kick away all of the minor pieces of White. But on the other hand, these are really two annoying pawns. They're already advanced. This pawn is on the 5th rank, so it's really really tense game in an early stage of the game. So bishop to d6, we have bishop to b2, we have castling, and now knight from b to d2. You could also try bishop to f6, but still g takes f6, and now after something like knight to d2, this knight could be really kicked away by this central pawn storm, so there could be really kicked away too far from the edge of the board. So it's really a weird position, but in the game I think Alireza played the correct move. He didn't take out this knight because he doesn't want to centralize more pawns of Blacks. In the game c4 played by Fabiano Caruana, and we have now queen to c2, preventing some knight to e4 outposts here. Queen to c7, we have castling, and now knight from b to d7. Bishop to c3. You see what Alireza is preparing. He wants to push the pawn further. A simple idea. We have the two connected pass pawns. They're restricting this at least 3 squares on the edge of the board. Very annoying, as I said, position to handle for Fabiano. Knight to c5. The clear idea is, of course, to get a very nice outpost of the knight on a very active square on d3. This would be the so-called octopus knight. Very nice, centralized, and controlling, of course, 8 centralized squares. So a5 played by Alireza. He doesn't hesitate for a moment. He plays simply straightforward chess, of course. That's why we love his chess. Knight to a4, and we have b6. The idea is again clear. There are also some tactical threats here on h2. There could be something like knight to d2, and you couldn't recapture maybe with the knight. Then you get bishop takes h2, so b6 kicking away the queen, and now the queen has to move to b7, and the queen is a little bit out of game, if you notice that, because you don't want to have your queen as a blocker of a pawn. So that's why you would love to maybe bring your knight there, but so far it's not possible because Alireza has played so far an aggressive setup. Bishop to d4, attacking the knight, and we have knight to d2, knight takes d2, and now knight to d3. Rook to b1. You see, we're getting our rooks behind our pawns. This here Alireza applies really the so-called Tarashul. We should really bring our rook behind our pawns now. There are now clear targets. If we manage somehow, that's basically our main goal here from White's perspective. If we manage to get these two pawns connected on the 6th rank, I think then it's game over here for Black. So rook to a6. You have to again create a blockade. You don't want to allow your opponent to push the pawn further. As I said, the pawn on a6 is simply suicide here for Black. So rook to b5. Simply getting the rook on a more active square. We have rook to c8, and now rook to b1, h6. Maybe not the best of moves. Maybe here finally e5. You have to counterattack here in the center. If, for instance, something like bishop to a1 happens, then maybe to further cement our knight, or maybe try in some occasions. But so far it's not possible because your c4 pawn could be weakness. But as I said, maybe in long terms, a d4 pawn breakthrough could make something happen, and also e4, of course, protects the knight further. Then we could try maybe something like f5, f4. So it's really an opposite side attack game, but it's a central attack against the queen side attack. Maybe e5, as I said, a little bit better. It at least paralyzes the dark square bishop a little bit of White, but in the game h6, a passive move here by Fabiano Caruana. We have now g3, we have bishop to e7, again maybe e5, really kicking away finally this bishop. But as I said, bishop to e7, another passive move, and now Alireza Firouzja uses this moment and tries simply to split the pawns with the move e4. Great move. The evaluation here is much better for white. In the game, e5 was played, but now it is simply too late because we have bishop to c3. A better idea, there is also a cool tactical line that maybe Alireza missed, is to play the move bishop to e3. And now after potential d4, you could take here the pawn on c4, because if pawn takes bishop on e3, then we have queen takes d3, and okay, you could have maybe a check, we can take bishop to c5, but now king to f3, and the king is perfectly fine here because we don't have light square problems, as black doesn't have any more than light square bishop. And I simply like more this position, of course, of white. We could try to remaneuver the knight and try to get it maybe on this square on d5. Alireza didn't play this move. He played the move bishop to c3, retreating now, and now bishop to c5. Now comes really the critical moment of the game, and now comes the moment that I really like in the game. Here, Alireza Firouzja played an incredible tactic. He plays rook takes c5. Okay, what to do here? If you try rook to c5, then we have e takes d5, and the problem is now after rook to d5, you see you cannot take. If queen to here queen to e5, queen to d5 happens, then b7, b8, and it's game over here for black. So that's why you see here Fabiano Caruana had to recapture with a knight takes c5, but now e takes d5 anyway. Queen to e5, queen to d5, pardon me, and queen to f5. Okay, what we can notice, again, we have these two connected pass pawns. This bishop is very active now. It was a bad piece a couple of moves ago. Now it's a good piece. It attacks, of course, the e5 weakness. It protects also this knight on d2. The queen is very active. We have attacked it, and now we could also try a pawn breakthrough motif, of course, with the move b7. Rook to d8, we have rook to b5. You see how Alireza is simply improving the position of his minor pieces. He's getting the rooks into the game. Very, very nice attack. This rook is simply out of game, and the knight is also a little bit passive. Although you could move it maybe here to d3, but still, then we risk always this b7 move. And I think if that happens, then again, black has really an uncomfortable game. So f6, we have b7 anyway. You cannot take, of course, because of the pin by the rook on the queen. Queen to d6, and now a very, very nice move, queen to c8. That was really great tactic that Alireza has prepared here. We have knight to b7. What you could also do is something like queen to b8, but then simply rook to c5 wins the game immediately. There is simply too much support of the c8 square. If you try to take, then we simply promote, and we're continuing the game with two pieces up. So after the move queen to c8, this was the stunner, I believe, because knight to b5 was played, but now simply queen takes b5. We have queen to c6, queen takes c6, and now rook takes c6. Okay, what we can notice is, of course, that still white has at least this pass pawn. Whenever you play this endgames, when you have two minor pieces against the rook, it's very, very important to create a pass pawn. If you could just imagine one position, if it's not possible, of course, in this game, but if you could just imagine if black has a pawn on c5 and white has maybe a pawn on c4, then I think that white doesn't have a winning game, because the pawn structure is simply too static. You cannot create a pass pawn situation. So it's really hard to win this endgame. Fabiano Caruana yesterday won the game against young Kg2 Kg6 in a similar position, but the pieces were active. But in this setup, black has also now two rooks, which are very dangerous. You can create a rook battery, and that's why I think to create this pass pawn here, like Alireza Firouzja did, is a very, very important strategical element of this endgame. So rook to b6, trying to force really the trades of rooks. We have rook to c7. Now, if the rooks are off the board, at least one rook, if it's off the board, then again this pass pawn situation I think is simply too much to handle. The only thing that maybe Fabiano Caruana can rely on here in this position is to create somehow a rook battery. So rook to c7, we have a6, rook to a8, knight to e4. Very nice move, because Alireza Firouzja sensed that here the pawn could be in danger, so he remaneuvered the knight and protected it with move knight to c5. Rook to c8, we have rook to b5, h5, h4, king to h7, and now again Alireza feels that the king could be very, very active, so he's now competing with his opponent's king here. He's trying to go into this parallel setup, and now king to e3. Now the king is centralized, the bishop is on a good square, the knight is on a good square, The rook has a good activity, the pawn is protected, so great performance here by the young Iranian. So rook to c6, we have bishop to b4, we have c3, bishop takes c3, because in this position you don't have good moves anyway. You could maybe try something like g5, but again h takes g5, after h takes g5, king to f3. Still you could make maybe again this move c3, but if you try to push the pawns too much, you see there are also some tactical threats with maybe something like knight to e4, bishop to c3, and then rook takes e5, so the king could be also endangered here on f5. So that's why after the move bishop to b4, we have c3, bishop takes c3, and now king to g6. Here really Fabiano Caruana feels that he cannot win this game. He's hoping now really for a draw, so that's why he retreats with the king. We have bishop to b4, rook takes a6. Desperate try here by Fabiano Caruana, because simply knight takes a6, rook takes a6, and now rook to b7. This is now a good endgame here for Alireza. Although he's a pawn down, but he has this extra piece. What he wants to do is get somehow the bishop here on f8 and attack the weak g7 pawn. So that's why Caruana retreats with the rook. He has to defend his weak g7, and now king to e4. We have rook to d8, bishop to c5, rook to a8, and now king to d5. Great endgame technique here, because what we also now want to do is get maybe our king somewhere here, because the good thing about the setup is that this bishop is protecting our key protector of our pawn chain. So it's of course the pawn on f2. So it's good now to have all of our pieces on dark squares, because at least we can protect them. So even if Fabiano Caruana managed to get somehow here on the second rank, still this pawn is protected, and we can play much freer with our king. So rook to a5, we have rook to a7, rook to b5, and now king to c6. Here Alireza sneaks in really with the king to d5, again a similar idea, but now king to c4, rook to b8, and now rook to c7. We have rook to a8, and now finally this king comes very actively to the game. Now our clear target is again the weak g7 pawn. Rook to a6, king to e7, king to f5. We have king to f5, g5. We have bishop to e3, and now after g takes h4, king to g4, and now this is now winning move. Rook to c4. You cannot take this pawn. That's the main problem here. Fabiano Caruana tried king to f3, but now king to g6. We can grab this pawn. e4, cutting off the connection between the rook and this pawn, hoping maybe to grab it somehow, but now simply king takes h5, f5, now king to g5, again preventing maybe f4 pawn breakthrough here in the game. Rook to a5, bishop to f4, play by Alireza. Great move, because after king to f2, we can simply play this check. We have king to f3, and now again rook to c3, king to e2, and now we have now the pass pawn. The most important thing is that we have blocked a potential e3 move, so that's why here it's a losing game for black. Rook to a1 was played, simply h6, pushing the pawn further. Now we can grab this pawn, and after this pawn was taken in this position, Fabiano Caruana resigned. So great performance by Alireza. I believe this was, I think, from the beginning, a surprise in the opening. Really great opening theory preparation. So middle game technique, really this great tactics. Rook sacrifice for the initiative to really get his pawns rolling. Endgame technique also great. As I said, still, of course, Alireza can improve. I hope he does. I hope he can stay motivated and try really harder and harder, because he was so close, as I said, to win even the match game against Magnus Carlsen. Still, they're going to meet again in this Altibox Norway Chess tournament, when Alireza will have the white pieces against Magnus. We'll see what will happen. I wish all of them all the best. I really hope only for a good chess, but as I said, Alireza is simply, I simply feel that something going on around him. He can really be the one sort of. Okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. I really enjoyed it a lot. If you want to see more games from this tournament, check out my Altibox coverage. Here is the link. And if you want to see the best chess games played by computers, check out my best chess games played by top engines. And if you like this content, you can also subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.